Hello everybody. I'm talking to you here from my home institution, the University of Western Sydney, on a wet spring afternoon. And I'm kind of trying to connect with you all sitting in autumnal or maybe wintry Montreal in a soulless hotel meeting room sometime in the immediate future. So please forgive my absence. As November approached, it just seemed that it wasn't possible for me to drag myself around the world again, much as I ideally wanted to be with you today, to hear what you have to say, to reconnect with precious friends, and to remember my soulmate and writing and thinking partner, Graham. And instead of being here in person, I'm sending them this short video presentation, and I'm hoping that the session will be recorded and I'll be able to listen to it and listen to you all very soon. So thanks to Simon Doherty, who's filming this little video, and to my audience, Stephen Healy and Anne Hill, who are standing in for all of you at this event. And I really want to start by thanking Josh Fisher for organising this panel on capitalism, feminism and the politics of the possible. Engaged research in honour of J.K. Gibson-Graham. I'm deeply grateful to you, Josh, and I know that Julie would have been thrilled by this event. And then I want to thank all of the presenters and discussants. What a great lineup. Some of you are well known to me, and others I do hope to meet in person sometime. I'm even more humbled and honoured to think of you all together, putting your minds towards the work of J.K. Gibson-Graham. That joint authorial presence has suffered a piercing blow to her personhood in April 2010 when Julie passed away. So I thought that one thing I could do from my distant location was to tell you some of the stories about our work that's continuing and developing, especially in the context of the Community Economies Collective, which Julie and I formed with a few of our graduate students many years ago, and which has now grown into a research network of some 30 scholars around the world. And that network has organised the Community Economies website that some of you might be familiar with. When Julie died, I sensed a seismic shift in the affect and the activities of our collective. I was incredibly supported by members of the collective, and of course by Julie's wide network of devoted friends. At her memorial, Sharon, one of Julie's oldest friends, referred to the story of Charlotte's Web to refer to all the little spiders, academics and activists alike, whose work had been made possible by Julie's life. And for me, the image of a spider web that's been broken apart, but that has been reconstituted and strengthened in the process, sums up what's been happening, I think, over the last year and a half. Projects that we had in progress have been picked up by others, and new collaborative projects have emerged. Our community economy collective meetings in the US and Australia have increased in frequency, and our research planning has become even more purposeful. So I just want to mention a few of the directions that our work's been taking that might most connect with your anthropological interests. First of all, this is a session organised a lot around community-based action research. And that kind of work is continuing in our group. The work that I've done with others in the Philippines is continuing in a number of different ways. And here we've been interested in trying to intervene to try and build ethical community economies at the local level. We've been interested particularly in developing non-capitalist enterprises in the form of social enterprise development. And with some other colleagues, I made a DVD on social enterprise development in the Philippines in 2008, which now has been distributed and shown in the Philippines and elsewhere. And this was a trip that I took a while ago to show that film to some of the community researchers who've been involved in the project of initiating and building social enterprises. This is a showing in Bohol. And one of my doctoral students, Anne Hill, is in my mini audience here today, has been continuing and building on the work that we did in our action research projects. She's working on regional food economies and how they come into being. And I think this will touch base with some of the speakers in the session today, particularly Lisa Markowitz's work on community gardens. And has been working with both community gardens in the Philippines and also other initiatives that are building social enterprises based on food production. And this particular project is one in Metro Manila, working with communities who are starting to generate food, making Tetra pots out of discarded drinking boxes, to generate food security for communities that have been affected by typhoons and flooding. And this, I think, touches base with the kind of enterprises that Lynn Stevens and Lynn Milgram have been working on in Latin America and in the Philippines, working with women in innovative ways to build new kinds of enterprises that produce value for communities. So the work in the Philippines is continuing, and we're still, I guess, working on the question of how social enterprises can work together to create new kinds of regional development pathways for communities that are often marginalised by mainstream globalisation. Other work that I've been doing with other of my community economies group is to extend the analysis of diverse economies into the Pacific, and in particular use this work to start thinking about gender equality issues. And this was the talk that I was going to be given if I had got there to be with you today. In the Solomon Islands, we've been working with communities on mapping diverse economies, and these slides show the map, not on an iceberg, as we've often used an iceberg to show diverse economic activities, but on a floating coconut. And here we tried to show the activities of men and women that were underneath the waterline, but were producing well-being and sustaining lives in the community. And on the basis of looking at gendered relations to the diverse economy, we started to work on the ways in which wealth is being generated in families and in communities and distributed. This is a group of women looking at the value that they produce, both in monetary terms, in food and in other kinds of resources, that's distributed to their families and to the communities. So the diverse economies work is being extended, I think, in areas of policy interest in the aid world. And some of the results of that work, I hope, we'll start to publish in the future. In another project, Stephen Healy and Jenny Cameron and I are working on completing the book that Julie and I started with them, called Take Back the Economy, Anytime, Any Place. And this is an attempt to produce a more popular version of a post-capitalist politics, but really extending that work to say, how do we start to build ethical communities that help us survive well together, that help us build on the commons that we have access to, that help us build on the surplus, the social surplus that is generated in communities. And in the context of this book, we're trying to build up tools that people can start to use to examine their own lives. And this is just one of the few tools we've looked at by trying to say, how do people spend their time in a 24-hour clock? What kind of diverse economic activities are they involved in? And what kind of ecological footprint is associated with different kinds of lives, say in the Philippines and in Australia? And what kind of balancing act are we engaging in by continuing to work the way we do in certain contexts with certain kinds of ecological footprints compared to others? So these are kind of the ethical questions of community economies that we're trying to operationalise in the context of a book that we hope will be of more general use than an academic audience. At the moment, I'm wrestling with a chapter based on the commons, and Stephen Guterman's work on the community economy that makes and shares a commons is the kind of key phrase that we keep coming back to over and over again to try and think about how, as a collective of groups of people, we might start to look at what are the commons that we share and how do we sustain and maintain them and not draw them down in a way that really threatens our livelihood on this planet. So that book is a little bit overdue, but is hopefully going to come out next year or the year after. Another place that we're extending the work of the Community Economies Collective is trying to start to think about the needs of the more than human. And in a workshop that we ran in February 2010 in Sydney, we were really starting to respond to the challenge that Val Plumwood, who also died recently, the eco-feminist philosopher, Val Plumwood has posed, asking how do we start to go on in a different mode of humanity in the face of our climate-changed world. And I organised a workshop in Sydney that brought together people from the Ecological Humanities Research Group that's been led by Val Plumwood and the anthropologist Deborah Bird-Rose, who's shown in this picture, and also eco-feminist philosopher Freya Matthews. And this is one of the last activities that Julie was engaged in February 2010, before she died. It was a wonderful workshop where we started to think about an ethics for living in the Anthropocene. And out of that workshop, we've now produced a small volume, which I hope will be published next year, on an ethics for living in the Anthropocene, where we actually came up with a manifesto that talked about the stories we need to be telling, the kind of thinking we need to be doing, and the researching we need to be doing if we start to consider the needs of the more than human as well as our own needs in thinking about the future and in developing ethical economies. Lastly, then, I just want to mention one very exciting thing that's happened for us, which is the translation of A Post-Capitalist Politics into Spanish. And here I have Arturo to thank for putting us in connection with these wonderful translators, particularly Juliana Flores in Colombia, who've taken our book and now produced, just in the last few months, it's finally been published, the Spanish version of Post-Capitalist Politics. And I hope that at this conference there'll be some flyers for people to order copies of this from the publishers in Colombia to read. And I hope, of course, that our work then will be read more widely in Latin America and other parts of the world where Spanish is spoken. So my heartfelt thanks to you, Arturo, for making this happen. Thank you. So that's just some of the things I think that are happening, and I hope that you have a wonderful session today. I very much look forward to listening to the tape of all the papers and the discussion. I very much wish I was there, and I send my love and best wishes to you all. Thank you.